Erdogan made sure that the general elections was not simply about who was going to rule Turkey, but it was a referendum about the future of the regime in Turkey. And he asked the electorate to back his plans to institutionalize an executive presidency, a centralized system where he amasses legislative, executive, and judicial powers in his newly erected 1,150-room palace. Unfortunately for him, the electorate decided that Turkey should not leave behind its parliamentary system and tradition of pluralism, and rejected clearly the presidential model, the executive presidential model. And I think Erdogan's rhetoric revolving around prejudices, hatred, marginalization backfired. He was hoping to win the hearts and minds of the public by polarizing the society. He was hoping to win a majority by polarizing the society, but it seems this time he failed. So after almost 13 years in politics, where he had one victory after another, finally he has experienced defeat, which was quite difficult for him to swallow. That explains why he has been absent from the public for the last 3 days.
How much of the reaction do you think was about his naked grab for power? For instance, how much of it was about the use of extreme force against protesters and the locking up of opposition figures, that kind of thing?
Surely there are a multitude of factors which brought this about. One is the Gezi Park protests and the brutal suppression, which led to not only mass arrests, but also to the death of quite a number of protesters. Second comes the graft probe of December 2013, which exposed beyond doubt the extent to which Erdogan and his family and the network of cronies were implicated in
corruption,
in a wide number of corruption cases and embezzlement cases. Then came also the economic difficulties. The Turkish economy is no longer where it was during the first couple of years of Erdogan's rule. And lately, I think the electorate was beginning to feel that Erdogan is no longer a good manager of the economy. On the contrary, Erdogan was becoming a liability for the Turkish economy because of the ways in which he was eroding rule of law in Turkey, because of the kind of political crises he kind of sparked. So all these factors combined, and Erdogan, I think, final touch, basically the final drop in the glass was the executive presidential system. And when all these factors came together, I think the Turkish electorate decided that they have had enough, and they kind of showed Erdogan the red card.
And where is public opinion now on the long debated question of Turkey's secular status, the separation of powers, if you like?
I think this is still an open-ended question. That is, Turkey is still trying to find a new modus vivendi around religion and state relationship. And this question, of course, is not only a crucial question for Turkey's future, but it's also a major question for the Middle East and its future. The Turkish model of secularism did go through, let's say, a crisis period under Erdogan's rule. But this was not simply due to Erdogan's, let's say, Islamist policies. It was also a result of the problems built into Turkey's model of secularism, which gives the state a heavy-handed kind of control over the sphere of religion. I think what we are seeing today is an attempt to find a new modus vivendi whereby a secular state tradition is combined by religious freedoms and rights for people of all walks of life, whether Muslim or Christian or Jewish or agnostic or atheist. So Turkey is still trying to find a new model to accommodate its religious pluralism. And I think 13 years of Erdogan rule and the shortcomings of that rule will be kind of a guiding line for a new modus vivendi to be reached.
Well, Turkish elections don't only matter to the Turks, obviously. For a start, you've got right on your southern border large numbers of Islamic extremists from al-Nusra and the so-called Islamic State. How is this election going to change that, or change Turkey's position on that?
I think Erdogan's trademark in Turkish politics was his adventurism and his recklessness. Turkey has always been quite cautious and prudent vis-a-vis Middle Eastern politics. Turkey has always tried to play a neutral role, an intermediary role, a reconciliatory role in the Middle East. However, with Erdogan, Turkey took on a sectarian position in the Middle East. It allied itself with either Sunni conservatives in some cases or with Sunni radicals in other cases, and Turkey has become involved in various proxy wars, in various sectarian clashes in the Middle East. This did not, of course, go well either in the Middle East or in Turkey. I would argue that a majority of Turkey's population is not happy about the way in which Turkey is now a side to the sectarian clashes in the Middle East. So after the elections, we could expect Turkey to kind of correct its course back to its traditional foreign policy. That is, I would expect Turkey to be less likely to be involved in the Middle East sectarian clashes. I would expect Turkey maybe try to go back to its earlier position of an intermediary and a neutral power. But more importantly, Turkey might once again become a model, not of sectarianism, but of secular, liberal, democratic governance. And this, I think, is the most important outcome of the elections.
In practical terms, what about those porous borders into Syria and Iraq, which it is widely reported have seen a lot of people going to fight for extremist groups from Turkey, and also a lot of oil coming back in tankers and so forth in the other direction, bringing money to the extremist groups?
So no matter what kind of a coalition arrangement comes out of the elections, Turkish borders will be less porous because all three opposition parties have been strongly skeptical of Erdogan's involvement in the Middle East and its sectarian wars. So no matter what arrangement of a coalition we have, Turkey will be less likely to be supporting sectarianism and radicalism in the Middle East. Turkish borders would be better protected, and Turkey would be much less likely to provide logistical and financial aid to the radicals. So we should expect, I think, Turkey to step back from its adventurism of the last, let's say, decade.
And is Erdogan going to allow all of this to happen? I mean, it is still a fragile situation. There is no coalition yet. It was only a parliamentary election. He remains the president with considerable power. What's his next step?
Now, no one should underestimate Erdogan. Although this is his first major defeat, he still has a lot of potential to make a comeback. And to be frank, Turkey's opposition parties do have a challenging task ahead. On the one hand, Turkey needs to get back on the European Union membership track. Turkey needs to kind of mend its relationship with the NATO. Turkey does need to re-establish cordial relationship with its neighbors. When you think about it, Turkey currently doesn't have an ambassador in Israel, in Syria, in Egypt, in Armenia. So the list is growing as Erdogan and his protege Davutoğlu's foreign policy backfires. And to be frank, Erdogan will do his best to make sure his vision remains the guiding vision for Turkey. Now, we will see...
there's some conflict to come.
There certainly is some conflict to come, primarily because Erdogan is at a point in his career where he cannot lose. Unlike all the previous leaders of Turkish political history, he knows that there is no possible way for him to retire because he knows there is a majority in Turkey that is willing to come after him for corruption, for brutality against the Gezi protests. This means he has to be constantly winning and he has to be constantly in possession of an immunity, either a parliamentary immunity or a presidential immunity, because there is no way he can stand trial before Turkish courts and be acquitted, which means the only options for him is either to fight it out to the bitter end in his palace or some sort of an exile, either in Qatar or Malaysia, who knows where. But this, I think, ensures that Erdogan will never give up as long as he remains in Turkey.
That sounds almost sinister. That sounds like a very dangerous situation indeed.
It is. But I have full confidence in the resilience of Turkish democracy. Unlike many of the Arab Spring countries, Turkey has a long tradition of democratic institutions and processes. More importantly, Turkey has a sizable new middle class who uphold liberal democratic values. They have seen how they have shown how resourceful they are, how creative they are, and how resilient they are. They organized one of the most successful ballot box observer campaigns in Turkish history, and they did this through volunteers. And I think by doing that, they have been an inspiration also for the greater Middle East, because we have sizable numbers of youth in the Middle East, and they're looking for a model. And so far, ISIS was one model which attracted the disgruntled youth of the Middle East. Now, hopefully, Turkey is offering another model that's revolving around rights and freedoms, a Western lifestyle, but more importantly, an opportunity to self-actualize. That is, Turkish youth, I think, have shown the Muslim youth in the Middle East there is a democratic alternative, there is a pluralist alternative, and one can, through peaceful means, transform society and bring about a better life.